Hello, and welcome to the Chapter 4 presentation where we will talk about where and how to store Bitcoins. First of all, in order to spend a Bitcoin, there are certain things that we need to know. We need to know some basic information from the public blockchain, such as the coin ID and how much it's worth, as well as the owner's secret signing key, which is the main idea. It's all about key management. It's all about how you store and keep your keys so that you're able to spend your Bitcoin. When we talk about how to store and manage the coins or the keys, there are three goals that we have to keep in mind. The availability. Is it there when you want to spend it? The security. Can we make sure that no one else is able to spend your Bitcoins? And convenience. It needs to be easy to use, easily accessible, and available. The simplest approach, most basic, is local storage. This is where you store it on your own device, such as a computer or a phone. This is very convenient. It's also very available as long as your phone or device is available, which kind of goes hand in hand with the security of the device. It is only as secure and available as the device you're storing it on. Which means that if you lose your phone or if it crashes or if it's compromised, then you lose the key and your coins are now able to be taken from you. It's very similar to carrying cash in a wallet. It's nice to have the cash there in your wallet to spend when you need it, but you don't want to be carrying around your entire savings because you may lose your wallet. You may set it down somewhere and forget about it. You may be walking down the street and someone takes your money, takes your wallet. And same way with local key storage. So if we take this local storage approach, we usually use wallet software to help us out. Wallet software will keep track of your coins. It usually will provide a nice user interface so it's easy to use, easy to maintain. And it's a good idea to use a separate key and address for each coin. This makes it look like there are several different owners, helps with your privacy and security. And the wallet software can do the bookkeeping that the owner doesn't have to know about. So you don't have to get into all the minute details of everything. The wallet does it for you. And when using wallet software, you need to have a way of exchanging the coins. One example of this is by using a 58-character text string. A more convenient method would be using a QR code that is linked to your address. This can then be scanned by a phone for added convenience. Now we can talk a little bit about the difference between hot and cold storage. Hot storage would be the type of key storage that is online. It's very convenient because it's always handy, but can be risky. Cold storage would be offline, such as locked away in a safe or a method like that. It's very archival, but is very secure. Usually you would want to use both, just like what we do with cache. One thing to mention is that hot storage can send coins to cold storage even when the cold is offline. The cold storage will then just receive these coins the next time it is connected online. When you are moving back and forth from hot to cold, as we mentioned earlier, there are going to be separate private keys for both. Both the hot and cold must know the address for the other. Now, as I mentioned, hot storage can send coins to cold storage even when the cold storage is offline. It will be removed from the hot storage, but will not be available in the cold storage until the next time it connects online. So now we have a problem with how do these methods know the addresses or keys to switch back and forth if they're not online communicating. One way would be to generate a big batch of addresses or keys and transfer to the hot before going offline. However, a better solution would be to use what is called a hierarchical wallet. If you recall, the generate keys function would normally generate the address and the private key. However, with hierarchical key generation, it creates the address generation information and the private key generation information. It can then take this information and create multiple addresses and private keys. This will allow multiple addresses and keys to be created at one time. Bitcoin allows this, but not every cryptocurrency does. What this does is it allows the hot and cold sides to work together without a lot of back and forth communication online. So, how do we store this cold information? There are a few different ways. One would be the information is stored on a device, and then we lock the device in a safe. Another option is use a brain wallet. The information is encrypted under a passphrase, and then you just remember that passphrase. The passphrase must then be used in order to retrieve. Of course, the security of this is only as good as what the password is, which kind of runs into any type of password problem. There's also a paper wallet. So the information is printed on a paper and lock the paper up in a safe. The security is only as good as the security of the safe or wherever you have it stored. There's also an option of using a tamper-proof device. And this device will allow you to sign things but will not divulge what the key is. And again, the best way to go about this is usually the same as everything else, a diversity, is use a combination of all of these. So let's talk about splitting and sharing keys. Basically, that is keeping parts of the key in different locations. This is to increase the security That way there is no single point of failure for losing the key. The first thing to talk about is secret sharing. It's basically splitting it into shares. You take this information and split it into a certain amount of pieces so that if it's reconstructed with less than X amount of pieces, then nothing is learned. You must have X amount in order to gain access. In other words, if it's split into 10 pieces and you have to have 8 pieces to reconstruct the information, then if you only had 7 pieces of it, then nothing would happen. You have to have 8 to gain any information. This can be good because stores are shared separately, and your adversary must compromise several shares to get the key. And you can tolerate some of the loss because others still have the information. The bad part is in order to sign the information, it all has to be brought together at one time, then reconstruct the key. This is when it becomes vulnerable, when all of the pieces are brought together. So in order to get around this problem, we have something that's called multisig. This lets you keep shares apart, approve a transaction without reconstructing the key at any point. For example, it may require 3 of the 4 parties to sign in order to release the coin. This will keep one person from having all of the power, and others can still have access if one is gone. Now let's talk a little bit about ways that you can use other services to help you store your information. One example is an online wallet. It's like a local wallet, but it's in the cloud. This is going to run on a browser, and the site will send a code. They will also store the key. You log in with your login credentials and password to access the wallet. This is very convenient. There's nothing to install on your computer. It will work across multiple devices, so you can do transactions on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer. There are some security worries, though. It becomes vulnerable if the site is compromised or malicious. And hopefully, the site is going to be run by security professionals, which is not always the case. Another service is something that acts similar to a bank. And what does that banking service look like? You give the bank the money, or you make a deposit, and the bank then promises to pay you back that same amount of money later on at another time on demand. Now, the bank doesn't actually keep your money locked away in the back room, but what they usually do is take that money that you've given them and they will invest it or make loans or things of that nature. Now, they do keep some of that money around to meet withdrawals, and this is called a fractional reserve. A Bitcoin exchange acts a lot like a bank. It accepts deposits of Bitcoins and fiat currency or dollars with a promise to pay you back on demand. This will allow customers to make and receive Bitcoin payments, buy and sell Bitcoins for dollars or other fiat currency. And they typically match up a buyer and seller when selling Bitcoins for dollars. Now, what happens when you buy Bitcoins? Suppose an exchange account holds $5,000 and 3 Bitcoins. And then you purchase 2 more Bitcoins for $580 each. Now the account has $3,840 and 5 Bitcoins. Now it's important to note that this transaction does not occur on the blockchain. The only difference is the promise that the exchange makes regarding how many Bitcoins and how much money they will pay the account holder. Of course, this comes with some pros and cons. Pros are it connects the Bitcoin economy to the fiat currency economy. It's easy to transfer value back and forth between the two. However, there are some cons. You have risk, which is the same kind of risk that a normal bank would run into. And those are broken into 3 categories. One is a bank run, which is basically everyone shows up at the same time to collect their money, but they may not have that cash on hand or the Bitcoin on hand. The owners may be crooks, similar to like a Ponzi scheme where they take your money and there's promises to deliver, but then the money is spent on other things and it's not there. There's also the risk of a cyber attack. The security is compromised, the money's stolen. On a side note, it's important to say that 45% of exchanges go out of business and never make it. And one difference between a crypto exchange and a normal bank is the regulation. For traditional banks, the government usually imposes the minimum reserve requirements, which means they tell you, the bank, how much cash they have to have on hand in order to avoid that bank run problem. They also will regulate the behavior and investments that a bank can make. This will ensure depositors against loss. So, like for example, the FDIC tells you that your account is guaranteed up to a certain amount. So if the bank goes under, then you are guaranteed that money back. They will also act as a lender of last resorts. So if the bank is just a little light on cash, they will actually loan the bank that cash in order to meet the withdrawal demands. Of course, that money has to be paid back. However, this is not the case with crypto exchanges. Now, there is one thing that exchanges can do to give users comfort about how much reserve they have available to pay needed withdrawals. This is called proof of reserve. By proving how much reserve is being held, as well as how many demand deposits that are being held, the exchange can give the fractional reserve. All of this can be found through valid transactions on the blockchain. One thing to note is that this may not show all of the reserve. only that there is enough to cover. Now let's talk about payment services and when they are used. So if a merchant accepts Bitcoin because the customer wants to pay in Bitcoin, but the merchant really wants dollars because that's how he makes his profit and pays his bills. He also wants a simple deployment and obviously security. The merchant uses a payment services website and uses a broker to help with this. Once the payment service confirms the payment of the Bitcoin, the product can be sent to the customer from the merchant. And then the payment service will send the dollars to the merchant. One thing to note is that the payment services company absorbs all of the risks in this transaction. Now we can talk a little bit about transaction fees. We can recall that when the value of the inputs are larger than the value of the outputs, the remainder is considered to be a transaction fee. This fee is then awarded to the miner who records the transaction. Why are these transaction fees even there? Well, it's designed to offset the cost to relay and record transactions. Because the time spent doing these transactions is time that the person could have been spent on other things. Generally, the higher fee means that the transaction will be recorded and forwarded quicker. Now, it is important to note that not all transactions will have these fees. There is typically no fee if the transaction is less than 1,000 bytes, and all outputs are 0.01 bitcoins and larger, as well as the priority is large enough. Otherwise, the typical fee is 0.0001 bitcoins per 1,000 bytes. Now, most miners will enforce the consensus fee structure. If you don't pay, it takes longer to record your transaction. And most miners will prioritize transactions based on fees. In other words, the larger the fee, most miners will process those transactions first. Most wallet software will include these fees in their program. Now let's take a quick look at trading Bitcoin in a market similar to a stock exchange market. So where can you purchase Bitcoin? The best answer is online. You can also use an online broker to help set you up with someone that will sell or buy your Bitcoin. And there also are physical locations that you can go to and exchange Bitcoin with other people face to face. And just like any market, the Bitcoin market will act a certain way, which means that the market will match a buyer and a seller. And the market will be large and liquid and will reach a consensus price. These prices are set by the supply and demand of Bitcoin. So let's look at the supply of Bitcoin. The supply is going to be the coins in circulation, plus sometimes the demand deposits, but not always. Now the coins in circulation will eventually hit 21 million and will stay fixed. That number is set in the Bitcoin rules when it first rolled out, and will reach that number and will not mine anymore. Now, when do you include the demand deposits? The short answer is when they can actually be sold in the market. Now, the demand for Bitcoin, the Bitcoin demanded to mediate fiat currency transaction. So what that means is if Alice wants to buy Bitcoin for dollars, Alice sends Bitcoin to Bob, and Bob sells the Bitcoin for dollars. So it's basically all of the Bitcoins that are used in transactions. There's also Bitcoin that is demanded as an investment. So that is when I buy Bitcoin just to use it for an investment. I don't plan on using it for any transactions. It is solely to keep and to sell at a later time when the price is right. So it's basically when the market thinks that demand will go up in the future. And by using this simple model for transaction demand, we can tell that the general rules of supply and demand will apply as it does with any other market. When the supply is higher than the demand, the price will go down. In turn, when the demand is higher than the supply, the price will go up. Now, it is important to note that this will only include the transactional supply. It does not include supply or demand for coins that are purchased or sold for investment purposes only. That model would include several other factors.